Everyone, welcome to this workshop. My name is Megan Hunter. I'm the CEO and the co-founder of the High Conflict Institute. We're based in San Diego, California, but I live in Arizona where it's almost always hot. So I don't know where you're joining us from. Maybe you're from the US or Canada or from, Europe or Africa or just any other part of the world, maybe Australia. So wherever you are, you're very welcome here. And I hope we'll have a good hour together to just kind of learn and think about things in a little bit different way, perhaps, and maybe expand our minds a bit. Now, I just want to preface today, you can see we're going to talk about trauma. And I have been thinking about this in relation to alienation for some time. And I don't want to say that this is absolute fact, and I don't want you to go away from this session with the idea that anything that I say is absolutely applicable to your situation. I just want us to think about things and hopefully lead to some connections, some compassion, and maybe open some doors. So today, the talk is about a serving of trauma for everyone, the timeline and roles of alienation, trauma, and abuse. Now, you'll see here in a while that, yes, we are going to talk about trauma, but we're also going to go a little bit beyond that and talk about some other, perhaps some other driving forces of alienation cases, some things that I've been picking up on just in the last year or two and started to think of them in a different way. So who's who in the zoo? I know, sounds kind of funny, right? Families weren't designed to be in conflict or to be apart and especially to be in consistent conflict. We were really meant and designed to function best when we're connected, when we support each other, when we can put pressure on each other, right? Maybe the elders putting pressure on the younger folks to get back in line when maybe they're stepping out of line, things like that. Our tribal communities have done this, and in many countries around the world yet today, we still see this sort of family structure. And I think that probably decreases the chances for alienation and separating parents and children to exist, right? So connection within the family and outside of it helps kids develop a strong sense of themselves, their place in the family, and their place within the community as a whole. So I'm preaching to the choir. I understand this. You know that when there's family dissolution, when the family gets separated, it's not the best role model. It's not the best map, and the best that we can do for our kids in terms of helping them know their place in the world and how to fit in society. So what happened? Why do we now live in this world of alienation and estrangement and so much family disruption? Is it connected to the loss of connection within the families? Is divorce too accessible? Is having children just such an optional thing now, and that maybe people aren't thinking things all the way through? But here's maybe, a few thoughts that come to my mind. Families live far apart geographically, right? And in tribal communities, we don't have that so much. They're, living together, so that you kind of have to get along if you are living together in a community, in a group. So now we have, people living not only across town or across the city, but maybe across the state, across the province, across the ocean in another country, another continent, making it a lot harder. Now, does that mean there's going to be alienation? Of course not. But these are just some of the things that may be happening, as families, kind of lose some of that connection. So the logical chain of family authority seems to have flipped as well. Like I mentioned a minute ago, the elders that kind of role model for the younger folks and help them make good decisions and apply pressure when they're not making good decisions. Some of that seems to be flipped on its head, where the kids are sort of the dog wagging the tail, and everything's focused on, in some cases, on the children making decisions, or at least being used as an excuse for decisions. So the authority seems to have flipped, and maybe we lose some connection there. Dissolution of family structure in terms of divorce, those kind of disruptions. The clear boundaries have disappeared. I've already mentioned that. The pressures, the pressures from outside forces, and then maybe a lack of good role modeling. Maybe we don't see the good role modeling because we've been in a few decades now of family disruption and a lot of family conflict and disputes, and our courts, being an adversarial system, sort of support the, unwittingly or unfortunately. Support this adversarial conflict situation, which isn't the best for families. Over time, this weakens the family and can open the door to instability within the family. Now, we know of situations where families are doing fine after a divorce, after a separation. Is it ideal? In my opinion, no, but they are able to co-parent well. The children are feeling safe, secure, protected. They have consistent rules and structures in both homes. Communication is clear, and there's just not a lot of conflict that's being observed by the kids. So in those situations are more ideal, but a lot of times, in many cases, what caused perhaps the family to divide actually causes it to weaken and open the door then to perhaps some alienating behaviors. So could it be that alienation behind the scenes comes from some unaddressed trauma? If you've read much about alienation, you know that, people have many different theories. Some say it's attachment, some say trauma, some say a whole lot of things. But what we're focusing on today is unaddressed trauma, maybe some attachment issues, and some abuse. Then later in my talk, I'm going to focus on kind of the flip side of that. But we're going to start here. So if we could be a fly on the wall, right, and see what's happening behind the scenes, maybe over a lifetime of someone, to see how their childhood was, and then when they got into a marriage or a parenting situation, and what happened in that home, and what's said to the children. I mean, wouldn't it be great if we could just have that perspective? We can't, obviously, but there's other ways we can kind of figure out the history, like what has happened. So we're going to talk about this thing called the ACE score. Have you ever heard of the ACE score? It's been around a bit now, and it's pretty clever. It was designed by a couple of researchers who were researching obesity. And as part of the questionnaire for participants, there were 10 questions that focused on the person's childhood and some adverse childhood events, thus ACE, adverse childhood events, to see what kind of impact that had on their obesity. So over the years, it's just really grown as an excellent assessment for anyone to kind of address what their own score is, how much or what kind of level of adverse childhood experiences were in their own lives. So let's have a quick look at someone else talking about the ACE score.
What would you do if you knew there was a way to help protect your family from future health problems, such as diabetes, high blood pressure, even alcoholism, drug abuse, and depression? The future sounds so far away, but to your children, every minute in their growing brain counts toward a healthier, more successful life. That's because positive experiences and environments help build stronger foundations for developing healthier brains. And healthier brains lead to greater emotional well-being, greater success in school, and brighter futures. Negative experiences like living in a house with verbal or physical abuse, sick or divorced parents, or emotional neglect create toxic stress that can hinder your child's brain development and lead to those unhealthy outcomes in the future we talked about. We've all heard of stress, but what makes stress toxic? When the weight from all those adverse childhood experiences we mentioned builds up, it can become too much to bear and affect how children look at the world. We call those experiences ACEs for short. Leaves you wondering why you've probably never heard of ACEs before. ACEs are common, but talking about them isn't. In fact, 2 out of 3 patients surveyed have at least one ACE, but they may not know how that ACE score is affecting them or their family. That's because a person with a high ACE score doesn't win. As the number of ACEs increases, so does the risk for negative health outcomes. A score of 5 or more on the ACE survey raises the chance of developing severe health concerns in adulthood to 55%. And those with 6 or more ACEs can die an average of 20 years earlier than those with no ACEs at all. Sounds scary, but the worst part? Parents with high ACE scores are more likely to raise children with high scores too. And it can lead to behavioral issues, school failure, and physical and mental problems. But even if you have a high ACE score, there's good news. Because now you know, and now you can change the direction of your life and help others in your family. The key? Well, as we mentioned earlier, ACEs are common, but talking about them isn't. Changing the conversation can help break the cycle and change lives. To start a new conversation, first take the ACE survey online. It's 10 easy questions that'll let you know if you or your family is at risk. Usually that's a score of 4 or more. Whether you score a 1 or a 10, tell your physician. And remember, a child's brain is always changing and growing, so every positive experience you provide is like another building block on the road to a healthy brain and a healthy future. Funded by a grant from State of Tennessee Building Strong Brains.
Okay, so thank you, baptistonline.org. There's tons and tons of videos online if you want to learn more about ACEs, but and that one was very specifically connected with physical health, also some emotional mental health, but that was from a hospital system, so of course it connected to physical health. But we're going to talk about how it connects to maybe alienation too. I also wanted to let you be aware of this book. It's just such an interesting title, and the reason I know about it is because my little publishing company published this book. All My Friends Are Zeros. So this was originally titled something else, and it's the story written by this wonderful gal named Jessica Nicely. She lives in Arizona. And she learned about the ACE score many, many years ago, and I believe she had a 9, which is about as bad as it gets. So she wrote this kind of the story of her life and all the things that happened in her world, like her mom leaving her, leaving the family when she was just a toddler, leaving her with a dad that was abusive. He eventually committed suicide. There was abuse in the home, lots of anger, even some other forms of sexual abuse, and lots of things that we see in that ACE test. So she wrote this book about how she believes she managed to end up having a resilient life. And I want to say here, not everyone who's endured some abuse or has a higher score is going to end up alienating or end up with some really horrible behaviors or something like that. Some will, some won't. But for Jessica, her approach was that, yeah, she had some things that she had to work on. But she believes that because she was surrounded by many friends who, if they had taken the ACE survey, would have come up with a 0 score because they had intact families without abuse, without prison, without all of those things we see in that test. And the influence of those on her life helped her become more resilient. So it's just an interesting book. And it's the subtitle, My Secret to Overcoming Adverse Childhood Experiences. So this came out several years before it became kind of popular and more known, and I thought it was really pretty fascinating. So what does the ACE score mean? As your ACE score increases, the risk of disease and social and emotional problems increases. So if you have a 0, you're probably going to be a pretty healthy person. You'll be pretty resilient. It will be more normal and natural to you to have healthy relationships and not live in maybe a reactive environment or a fear environment. So if you have, let's say, a 7 or a 6 or a 9, you might be more reactive. You might be looking over your shoulder, wondering what's going on. You might have a high startle response. You might be living in a fear world because you don't have those stable building blocks and that foundation underneath of you that really helps to give you stable, healthy relationships. And again, like I said, it's not one size fits all. It's not all or nothing. There's a whole range, right? But I want to take a look at a family history, and we're going to think of it in terms of this ACE score. So here we have mom and dad. Mom files for divorce. She requests and is granted temporary sole custody in the beginning. The kids are ordered to have nights in I think I was supposed to put 2 nights a week parenting time with dad. Forgot the 2. Mom doesn't always pass the kids to dad for several weeks because of school projects, illness, inclement weather. There's always sort of a reason behind, they can't come to your house. They can't come. I can't meet you. All those things. Dad asked mom several times, hey, it's my turn. It's my time. Is there time with me? And finally asks if his parents could see the children's grandparents, which mom also denies. And so then dad goes to the court, asks the court to enforce the parenting time order. In that hearing, mom accuses dad of sexually abusing one of the children. So this is common in family court. And I don't want you to go away from this talk thinking that this is a bias against women or this is what women do. We could flip this around and say dad files for divorce. In fact, I should have made a slide and just flipped it around so we could see it both ways. So don't get that in your mind that it's just a woman would do this, because it's absolutely not. I just had to pick one. So let's look at mom's history. If we look back at her whole lifespan, she was adopted at 6 months old of age into a family who already had kids present, their own natural biological children. The adoptive parents divorced when she was 7. And up to that point, there was some domestic abuse, yelling, cursing between those parents. The income was stable in the family. Mom claims sexual abuse on multiple occasions by a neighbor. Her own mother was often depressed and seemed somewhat detached. Her father had alcohol addiction and even had one misdemeanor DUI. So now mom gets pregnant at 20 and married almost immediately, and within 2 years is divorced. So here's the ACE survey. We're going to go through the questions in relation to mom. So we give a 1 if the answer is yes, and we give a 0 if it's no. Did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt? Okay, so mom says, yep. 2, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you, or ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured? 0. That's a no. 3, did an adult or person at least 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you or have you touch their body in a sexual way? 1, that's a yes. Did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special? Your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? She says yes. Did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you? Your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you or take you to a doctor if you needed it? That was a yes. Were your parents divorced or separated? Yes. Was your mother or stepmother pushed, grabbed, slapped, had something thrown at her, sometimes, often, or very often kicked, bit, and hit with a fist? That was a no. Did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic or who used street drugs? That was a yes. Was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a house member attempt suicide? That's a no. And did a household member go to prison? That's a no. So when we total them up, there's that ACE score we're talking about. Okay, so a 6 is pretty high. I mean, who would want any of this? I don't think any of us do. So we would all want to be a 0. We want a low number. So, you know, she has a pretty high number, sadly. Now let's take a look at Dad. Dad was raised in a 2-parent home. His own dad had a hot temper, but no domestic violence or domestic abuse reported. His mom passed when he was 20 by suicide. No addiction problems by either parent prior to the suicide. Parents used spanking for punishment, sometimes leaving marks. This is his own parents. They were low income, but had enough to get by. His girlfriend, Mom, who you just saw, was pregnant when he was 19. They got married immediately thereafter, and of course, divorced in 2 years. Now let's take a look at his score. The adults in his household didn't humiliate, put him down. Sometimes there was physical punishment, right? Spanking, so that's a yes. No sexual abuse. Did you feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special? He reported yes. Did you often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, no one protected you or take you to the doctor? He reported yes. Parents not separated or divorced. Mother was not abused by father. No alcohol problems. And there was an attempted suicide, so that's a yes, and no one went to prison. So Dad's score is a 4, which is still kind of high. Now, what does this mean, right? Let's look at it on a timeline. If we look at Mom, perhaps there's some attachment issues, some trauma history. We see the trauma history from the ACE score. And we know with adoption that, you know, it can have it's a wonderful, wonderful thing, but perhaps there's some attachment issues at the beginning. It depends. It's not, you know, blanket that way in every family, but sometimes there may be. And when there are other things present, such as that trauma history indicates, then, you know, you can kind of perhaps factor the attachment issue in as a possibility. And we see there that Dad had some trauma history as well. They got pregnant, got married right away. Wasn't too long because they were divorced within 2 years. There was conflict, and then Mom filed a divorce. Court orders, or Mom tries to obstruct Dad when he wants to have the kids. And then the court orders Mom to let kids visit Dad. Mom files no access order alleging sexual abuse, even though it's unsubstantiated. And Dad denies this and alleges parental alienation. And we see this in families over and over and over again. Now, does this mean Mom is a bad person? Do we know this is true or false? Does this mean Dad's a bad person? You know, who's who in the zoo? Right? Then we have the grandparents also. They get alienated too. And what about their ACE score? We don't even know. And I think these images are funny because I'm a grandparent and I don't quite look like that yet. But you can see where this happens, right? After this all happens here at the end, then, you know, it's probably, in some cases, going to end up where Mom says, I don't want the kids to see the grandparents either. So, you know, what could be behind some of this? Can the ACE score indicate whether alienation will happen? Not alone, it can't, right? But maybe it can lend understanding to what is going on behind the scenes, and so we can look at the situation as a whole. Because I think we get very focused in on alienation as this, parental alienation. It's this horrific thing, and I agree, it is horrific, it is terrifying. But I think if we can look at more of a big picture and a long game, we can have a better understanding. And the reason for that is so that we can do something a little bit differently and maybe make some progress. Should other factors be considered? Of course they should. Attachment and trauma issues aren't present in every case. There are, maybe other things going on, and we'll talk about some of those here as well. So what could be going on in some cases? Now this is, I know there's some work out there about, the attachment-based alienation theories, and I'm just going to make it really simple because I like to keep things simple, because I think simply. But as I recognize trends and patterns in generations, what we've seen over the last couple of generations is sort of a trend towards self-fulfillment, right? I need to be taken care of. We see this in the jobs and careers that young people are choosing, and whether they stay or not. And is money, as opposed to maybe my generation, where you wanted to increase your income, the generations who are parenting now are more interested in, some are more interested in that self-fulfillment, self-care. In Fortune magazine, there was research that said 73% of Gen Z would rather have a better quality of life than extra money in the bank. That's supposed to be quality, not qualify. I typed too fast. They want well-being, personal growth, fulfillment, a soft life, radical rest, and me time. Now, there's nothing wrong with this, right? And generations change over time. The pendulum swings, and they learn from their parents what they do and don't want to do in their own parenting and in their own life. So we see this now. 3/4 of them really are focused on this well-being, which, if we put this in a nutshell, it's a focus on all about me, or a lot about me, more than past generations, perhaps. I deserve happiness. I deserve fulfillment. I can parent on my own. I feel best when solo parenting. We're going to break this down a little bit, but think about this, right? The big picture. I deserve happiness and fulfillment. That's not a bad goal. I can parent on my own. Okay? I feel best when solo parenting. That knocks out perhaps knocks out the other parent or the other parent's family members. Gen Z parents understand that their children are not just children, but people in progress. And so they extend them the same level of consideration they would other adults. They value their children's opinions and show them respect by including them in decision-making. Relating to their kids as human beings doesn't mean they lose sight of their differences. It just means finding common ground to connect on. This sentiment is heightened even more significantly in Chinese Gen Z parents, who felt the most neglected and unheard by their own parents while they were growing up. They are making even more of a concentrated effort to build a different relationship with their own children. So in this survey, this study, 60% of Gen Z parents said they consider themselves and their children as equals. 62% say they often ask their children for their input when making plans. And here was a quote from one mom. I want to be able to have fun with her. I want to have a relationship where she's my best friend. Obviously, parenting comes first, but I also want that for an aspect. So I think what we've seen is this transition from the parent really being at the top of that structure, the parents, to now a parent that's thinking, I have all these choices, and one of the choices is to have a child. Now I have a child either with someone or by myself, and I need this child. I want this child to be my best friend. And listen, I've heard it 1,000 times from parents is, my child's my best friend. You hear often that I just want my child to be proud of me. You see this maybe on The Voice or one of the singing competition shows or any kind of competition show. A lot of people will say, I did this because just want my child to be proud of me. And it got turned around somewhere. It used to be the children tried to make the children proud of them, and I think they still do-ish, but it seems to be getting turned upside down a little bit. So, no generation ever gets it exactly right, but what implications can be drawn from this in relation to alienation? The priority of parental self-fulfillment and seeing the child as an equal and best friend may supersede the child's needs for whole family relationships, right? So what's this mean? What's most important to me is how I feel, right? Not thinking maybe as much about how the child feels. And in some cases, I don't want to say always, because none of this is always, but in this one, it's, I want to have a relationship where she's my best friend. Obviously, parenting comes first, so that's great. So this one at least has that aspect in there, but some don't. So it seems to be when this need for self-fulfillment gets flipped around and the parent's needs supersede the child's needs. And the other parent and other family members may feel like a threat to my self-fulfillment. Okay, I'm the only one who can take care of my child. I don't think the other parent can do a good job of that. What's behind that maybe is this need for this attachment to this child. And sometimes parents, even in intact families, can be engaging in alienation and they don't even realize it. I'm the only one that can really be there for my child, can satisfy the child's needs. And so the alienation starts growing in the home, the intact home, in the marital relationship and parenting relationship, where one parent is the only one that can do anything right. And over time, it's just creeping in that to this child, I'm the only one that's important, really the most important. And then eventually maybe there's a divorce, and then what do? This child's my best friend, and I can't let my best friend go, go over to the other parent's house. So let's recap this. Maybe there's trauma. We can see that very clearly through an ACE score. Maybe there's too much emphasis on self and reliance on the child as a friend. And sometimes maybe it rises to the level of a fear-based way of living and operating. And I think that's a lot of what's going on with this. But let me back up one thing I want to say too about the emphasis on self and reliance on the child as a friend. If we look at larger social role modeling, and you read things in the news, or they see it on TikTok or Facebook or whatever their platform is, of their contemporaries saying things like, I was, when I found out the sex of my baby, like through an ultrasound, I had gender disappointment at first. And then when the baby was born, it took me some time to get used to, what the baby actually was. My generation, I can't imagine anyone ever thinking that, let alone saying it out loud. Now they're doing both, and everyone else is reading this or seeing a video of it. And I think it reinforces that really it's all about me. And we've flipped it around, so we're not focusing on the child first. I hope this is making sense and the ties are coming together, the connections. So let's take a look at maybe some of these fear-based ways of living and operating. Oops, going the wrong way. We all like to be safe. Everyone on the planet likes to feel safe, whether we admit it or not, but we like to not feel anxious. So what do if you think about your worst fear? If you're afraid of heights, if you're afraid of spiders, snakes, snowstorms, icy roads, whatever it is, the fear that you have is producing all this internal distress and anxiety. And you want to get back to, you end up in a fear place and you want to get back to a safe place. We all want that. So what do we do when faced with our fear? You run from the snake. You don't get in an airplane if you're absolutely terrified of flying unless you have no other options, right? But we want to get back to that safe place so we can feel back in control. We don't like that. So it can get to a point of being very unhealthy in terms of creating good relationships between people. Because it can get to a place where some feel that they have to be seen as powerful to feel safe. They have to be seen as superior. I have to feel superior all the time so I don't have that fear and anxiety. But guess what? Life gets in the way and our fears get triggered sometimes, and all of a sudden my fear of feeling inferior, being inferior, seen as less than amazing, put me in that fear place, and I need to get back to the safe place. So I'm going to do what it takes to get back there. And in alienation, that could be that I just need to be seen as the best parent. If the court rules against me, or I'm going to feel disrespected because this superior thing, I just need to feel respected. So, and seen as a winner. So this need to feel superior and powerful and be seen as such may supersede the child's need for the whole family, right? I'm the best parent. I'm the only one, even if they're not that attached to the child. But see the child kind of as an extension of themselves, and this child needs to make me look good, needs to shine a light on me. And then if the child doesn't, that's not good. But you see this loop here, right? This is my safe space. When this fear happens, then I'm going to react in a certain way, and it may be putting the other parent down. It may be filing that court action. It may be starting to put thoughts and ideas in the child's head that the other parent and their extended family are all bad. Some really need to feel attached and feel connected. And when they feel abandoned, that fear of theirs, that, it can result in a lot of things. But one thing that I have thought a lot about is the scuba diving analogy. When we are trained as scuba divers, you learn that you dive in pairs. When you go off out in the ocean or the sea, the lake, to scuba, you take a partner because it's a high-risk activity. And if your air runs out under the water, your buddy will have an extra regulator, I think that's what you call it, and can help both of you breathe till you get to the top. And I kind of think about this attached and connected fear type very similar to that is I'm under the water and I feel like I can't get my own air. So I need it from my buddy. So there's a relationship partner now. The relationship partner is, sharing air with me. That can't last forever because someone's going to run out of air, right? At some point. Now this person's going to be really angry. So now let's say the partner says, I can't share my air anymore. I'm drained. I'm exhausted. There's just nothing. I don't have anything left. So let's separate. Well, now they're separated. The air hose is gone. Now this parent still didn't cure the air issue, now needs to attach the air hose to someone else. So who's the most obvious, I guess, and closest choice? It's probably the children. So we connect to the children even more, and now still being a good parent, but needing that oxygen from the children. Now the court says children go over to other parents' house. Well, where am I going to get my air? If the kids are over there at other parents' house, I can't, the air hose doesn't go that far. Now how am I going to breathe? And so this fear starts creating sort of a new scenario of, well, that other parent probably abused those kids. reports this to the court, and now it's on. What's the court to do? The court doesn't know what happened. Now the other parent can't see the child or children, and it grows and grows and grows. That is just one possibility. It may happen in some cases, maybe it doesn't. But this is what I've seen, and I've talked quite a lot about it, and had people that have come to me later and said, like when I've done a training like this, and they say, I thought you were kind of nuts for talking about the scuba thing and didn't believe it. And then about a month or two later, I started looking at my own parenting with my co-parent and what I'd been doing, and I realized I was absolutely engaging in alienating my kids from their other parent. So it happens sometimes, okay? I need to be the center of attention. And so you can see when somebody has these needs, absolute needs, to feel, life, right? To not feel in a fear place all the time, they may do what it takes to get back to this. They will do what it takes to get back to being the center of attention. These folks, particular, need to feel center of attention. If they feel ignored, that they're not the center of attention, they'll do what it takes to get back there. They'll cause some drama. And this type actually has a really hard time making decisions. And so it can take a long time to get to decisions. It can delay, family relationships. And then I need to dominate and con. They just fear feeling dominated. And when they do feel dominated, someone is getting to make decisions about their life, or they're just not going to play nice in the sandbox unless they feel like they're the one dominating. And as soon as that fear is triggered, now I'm going to do whatever it takes to dominate this person, and they may lie. That's where we see the con. Why that word con is up there. There can be some quite a lot of lying and deflecting. Across the board, there's not much taking responsibility for what's going on. And you see every single one of these at the bottom I put, may place own need to be connected over child's need for whole family. May place own need to be seen as superior over child's need for whole family. May place focus on self more than on the child's need for whole family. May place more focus, again, on self, right? And needing to dominate. So these are the more extreme ones, but this could be a lot of what's driving this wedge between families. So why is this important? Why do we need to know this? I think it's important so that we can have some wisdom, we can apply some empathy, and apply some strategies that might actually work, instead of just like beating our head against the wall, maybe doing the same thing this over and over that's really getting results. And I don't want to make light of it, and we're going to talk about some strategies here, but I don't want you to go away thinking, that it's just a simple thing. And I know you don't. If you're a grandparent, the terror in your heart, and the absolute feeling of loss of that time with your grandchild, the unity that you tried to build for your family. And there are a lot of different combinations with the ACE score and the, underprotection of kids and overprotection of kids, and getting things flipped around and that. But I think if we focus on a few simple solutions, we can at least feel some confidence that we're taking some good steps, and we'll feel a little bit empowered in that way. So let's talk about what maybe to avoid. And one of them is to avoid making accusations. Because, and you want to avoid forcing the issue through these direct accusations, because if you do this with someone who feels anxiety when they believe that their child is their best friend, right? When that goes on long enough, it's really hard for them to think of being away from that child and not being in control of the relationship with the child. And if you're coming along saying, you don't let me see the kid, and you're alienating, you're engaging in parental alienation, grandparental alienation, that just raises the threat level. And I want you to think about all of this in terms of threat, right? If someone is absolutely not letting you see their kids, there's probably some threat going on there. And there could be some junk on our sides too, and we're going to talk about that. But we always want to be thinking about this fear and the threats to safety. If we go back, remember, there's this fear place. And this is on the very extreme end, right? But even on the not so extreme end, there can be that, that fear and the anxieties that come up. And you combine that with generations now who believe that I need to be I am the most important one here. And any tinge of anxiety means I need to do something about it. And the something I need to do about it might be not letting the kids see you, right? So you see kind of how this chain of thinking goes. Avoid threats of court or lawyers. And I'm not saying there's not a place for court or a place for lawyers. There absolutely is. That's not my specialty. I'm talking about some conservative approaches you can kind of take that will increase your confidence, hopefully. So threats of taking someone to court, and we hear this all the time, is, well, if you don't do it this way, I'm going to take you to court. If you don't let me see the kids, I'm taking you to court. Okay, so you might go to court eventually. However, keeping the threats and fear in mind, think of yourself as on a team with that other parent or with your, the parent of your grandchildren, in order to give that child a good life. Now, notice I'm really focusing on the child, because I think in alienation, just by mere terminology, parental alienation, we get, it's a real focus on the parent. And I like to think of it as a focus on the child, because guess what? If you focus just on the parent, I want my rights, I demand my rights, I deserve my rights, then that's kind of all about me. And even if we have good intentions that will hopefully filter down to the kids, why don't we just flip this and focus on the children? Child alienation. This is hard on the kids. Guess what? Kids need a family unit. Kids need to see loyalty and trust and relationship between family members. So that's what we need to focus on. Keep your focus on getting this child, into a better position. And we're going to use our best strategies to do that. And one of them is to try to see yourself on a team with the parent who has this decision-making authority, and do what we can to help them see that you're on a team and not opposed to them and putting them in a fear mode where they feel threatened by you, okay? And we do this by using connecting skills. Connecting is, telling someone, I'm going to take you to court, is not a good connecting skill. It doesn't feel great. But saying, hey, I see all the hard work you do raising the kids, and I know it's challenging. That shows empathy, attention, and respect. My co-founder at High Conflict Institute, Bill Eddy, developed this ear statement method. And we're going to talk about a couple other methods here too. And I owe this all to him. He created all of this. So mad props to Bill Eddy. So ear statement, something that shows empathy, attention, or respect. This reduces the feeling of threat. And if you do it consistently, instead of fighting with this person, showing them some connecting, it could be humor. It could just be keeping a calm tone of voice. One of the most important things of all, keeping a calm, not condescending, not sarcastic tone of voice, using eye contact, showing that I want to be supportive in your role as a parent. Here's an example ear statement. I don't want to interfere or be intrusive in your life. I know parenting is tough. How can I help you? How can I be supportive to you? Now, I also know that many of you have zero communication and not of your own choosing. So I do understand that this is not for every situation. But if you do get that moment to have that, then just saying something and showing with your body language, your facial expression, your tone of voice that you care, right? That you are supportive and not a threat can go a long way. Avoid reputation smears. bad-mouthing the parent to others only escalates the conflict. It won't reduce it. And this is especially true on social media, as we all know. Instead, be supportive of healthy relationships for everyone. Remember, don't think of yourself as a victim. And I think we can get into that when alienation is happening. So we want to instead have a project of seeing yourself on a team for the child instead of me against the decision-making parent, right? He's an involved parent and wants a good life for the kids. So let's say that to our friends and other family members instead of, what a rotten SOB. He won't ever let me see the kids. She hasn't let me see the kids and has turned the kids against me. It's okay to be, we can't just deny that things are happening, but we don't want to badmouth and ruin someone's reputation, because ultimately, long game, that's just going to sabotage things. It can feel good to do that, but we shouldn't do it. Avoid hash it out conversations, meaning, I think let's just sit down and hash this out. Well, if someone's in fear-based mode, it isn't going to go well. So if you're in a situation where you still see this person or persons, sometimes there's alienation against grandparents or family members by both parents. Anyway, these typically only escalate people who are already in that fear mode. So instead, communicate. When you are in communication with folks like this, make proposals with your statements, okay? So a proposal is instead of making a demand, you're making a proposal. For example, I'd like to be as supportive as possible of the schedule and other consistencies that you've set up for the kids. Along that line, I'd like to propose that gradually, over time, the kids spend small amounts of time with me until they get used to it. And if you'd like to share a list with me of the structure, schedule, and rules at your house, that would be great. Now again, depends where you are, what stage you are in the whole process. If you're having some communication, maybe this could be a way to approach it. And I don't say that this is one magic ear statement or proposal that's going to get you success, but over time, if you can reduce excuse me, yourself as a threat and more of a support to that parent, perhaps there could be some success. Avoid long emotional emails and letters. These will either be ignored or will start an email war. I think you all know what I'm talking about here. Instead, in written communication, use a BIFF response approach. And if you see me train at this conference before or seen Bill Eddy train, we talk about this. You probably heard about this. We talk about it everywhere we go because it's what people like the most. A BIFF response is something that's brief, informative, friendly, and firm. Keep a response brief, keep a letter brief. Now, sometimes we call it BIFF response because it was developed, Bill developed it so that when you get that kind of that nasty email or text message, you have a structured way to respond in a way that extracts anything that's going to escalate conflict or get you another response back, right? So I see this as an extraction process. So we keep it brief, 2 to 5 sentences. We keep it informative. We just stick to facts. We don't argue. We don't blame. We don't admonish. We don't tell them, try to give them insight about how crappy they're being. We just keep it friendly and civil, and we keep it firm. Now, firm people sometimes get confused about. That doesn't mean that you're going to make the whole written content really hardcore and super firm. It just means you're going to close it firmly with what you have to say, and then you're done. Close it friendly, end it friendly. So if you don't want a response back, you're just going to give a firm close. If you need a response back, you're going to end it with a question. The very last sentence should be a question that focuses the person between 2 choices. You want to give people choices instead of ramming things down their throats. It's options, options, options. And you want to avoid giving advice admonishments or apologies when you're being blamed for something. And we can do this out of our own anxiety, out of our attempt to fix things. But, people aren't writing you for advice or admonishments. And that other parent is definitely not doing that. So here's a little example. An email between grandparents and a son and daughter-in-law. As you know, we are making the difficult decision of what to do with the farm after we retire. Although we've written you twice to inquire about your interest in taking over, we haven't had a response from you. With some financial deadlines approaching, we are faced with the deadline of September 15th, which means we need to hear from you by September 7th in order to get info to our attorney, dad and mom. Response from son and daughter-in-law, or from the daughter-in-law. You never wrote us about the future of the farm. You promised us years ago the farm would be ours when you retire. Now you're changing your mind? Let's be honest here. You've always preferred your other son, so I guess this shouldn't come as a surprise. You've basically shunned your own grandchildren, and now they'll be financially destitute. We've done everything we can to be nice to you, even when you've been horrible to us. See, husband, they're doing exactly what I told you they'd do. Ouch. So the grandparents write back. I guess that settles the matter. We will proceed with what we think is best for the farm and for us. We think it's important that our grandchildren know that we have not shunned them, nor would we ever, and we would like to request that we spend some time with them to explain the situation. They're always welcome in our lives. Want to be clear, we love our sons equally. It's just, we've never preferred the other one over this one. It's just that we don't see a path for turning the farm over to our son and you when you accuse us of things we haven't done. We didn't raise our sons to be this way, and frankly, we're ashamed by this behavior. We are here for your family always and hope you will join us for all family functions. Love, Dad and Mom. Now that kind of sounds okay, but is it BIFF? Are there any hooks in here that are going to get the conflict escalated even further? Probably, okay? So it's not brief. It's maybe 5 sentences, but it's a lot in there. So using the rest of the extraction process, we can get it down even further. So we would take anything that's not informative and factual, just factual, straight up information. Is it friendly? It's got love, Mom and Dad. I guess that settles the matter. Probably isn't a great way to start. I would say something, I would at first say, dear daughter-in-law, whatever her name is, and then say, thanks for your feedback, or thanks for providing that information. Something that makes it about her instead of about me, or just something that right off the bat just says, that's it. This is not this is firm, but it's the wrong kind of firm. And then speaking of firm, does it close firmly? We are here for your family always and hope you'll join us for all family functions. That's a nice firm close, but the sentence above it will blow that up. We didn't raise our sons to be this way, and frankly, we're ashamed by this behavior. That's going to get you shut down, or that's going to escalate conflict. Things like this is where alienation, little tiny seeds kind of start to develop. So if we rewrite it, we biff it and extract all that. Dear son and daughter-in-law, thanks for your email. After much contemplation and prayer, we have decided that we will proceed with what we think is best for the farm and for us. We will let you and your brother and his family know our wishes after we make the decision. We love you too and our grandchildren with every fiber of our being, and you are always welcome in our lives. We hope you will join us for all family functions. Is it brief? Yes. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And some people say a sentence can't be longer than 10 words, so keep that in mind. So don't make like 2 big sentences into one long run-on session to make it brief. Is it informative? Sticking to just straight facts. I believe it is. Is it friendly? We have dear, and it includes both of them. Thanks for your email. Love, Dad and Mom. Is it firm? I think so. We love you too, and you're always welcome in our lives. We hope you'll join us for all family functions. That's a firm close. And is there any advice, admonishments, or apologies? There are not. So this is a BIFF response, and it's kind of getting these last 2 sentences helps get them on the team with you. so that you're working on a team together instead of fight against each other. So that's BIFF. Now, percentage here. I've been using this lately where when I'm coaching folks, I'll say, what if you could allow what would it look like if you allowed the grandparents just 5%? A 5% difference in what you're doing now. You're not allowing them to see the child at all now. What would 5% look like? So if you're the grandparent, maybe you could use this same approach too. Or if you're the parent, you could use the same approach. What would a 5% difference look like if we could, if I could be involved in that child's life? Could we think about that? Or 10%, whatever. It kind of helps it seem like get away from all or nothing thinking and that fear-based thinking to, okay, maybe just a small percentage, as long as, and they're going to have a whole list of things for you, as long as I'm supporting, the 5% plus I'm going to support everything, that you're doing, the things you're doing with the children. I want to be consistent with your rules, your structure, all of those things. Okay, so remember, the solutions aren't easy. Anything I've said in this workshop is not meant to be gender biased one way or the other. I believe it's human people approach, and that it has a lot to do with what's happened to you in the past, your attachment, your trauma, your ACE score, your maybe the being too focused on self-fulfillment, things like that. So remember to use skills that build a team instead of building a problem and poking the bear. Just remember, people live in a lot of fear. Connect with your statements, something that shows empathy, attention, and respect. Make proposals instead of demands. It's a big switch. Consider the percentage idea. Be on the team. Don't be a know-it-all. And maybe consider your own ACE score and get some help if you're higher than a 3 or a 2. I've put some book resources here. There's a BIFF book for co-parenting that it can be used by anyone. The Calming Upset People with Ear, Don't Alienate the Kids, and Splitting. These are all by Bill Eddy. This one, Raising Resilient Children While Avoiding High Conflict Divorce. Even if there's already been a high conflict divorce, this book is brilliant. I recommend it to everyone. We have a course for parents, New Ways for Families, and you can access it here. That helps build skills that will get away from all or nothing thinking and more to flexible thinking and realizing the role of everyone in the child's life. All right, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Take care.